In today's lesson, we're going to talk about ordering fractions. Now, sometimes we may be in a situation where we want to compare more than two fractions. Now, for example, if Dan has eaten 2/6 of his candy, and Stuart has eaten 5/6 of his candy, and Kirsten has eaten 4/6 of her candy. Now, who has eaten the most candy and who has eaten the least? So the easiest way to compare multiple numbers is to place them on a number line. So let's do that. Now notice that you may have noticed that all of the denominators were the same. They were all sixths. So here we have a number line that consists of sixths, and that's fine. We can do that. And so we have 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and 6/6. So let's go ahead and place our fractions on the number line. So Dan had eaten 2/6. Kirsten had eaten 4/6, and Stuart had eaten 5/6. Now remember, on a number line, the farther to the right you go, the greater the number. So what this tells us is that Stuart had eaten the most candy, then Kirsten, and Dan has eaten the least. Now we could also show this using the symbols that we have learned previously for comparison to say that 2/6 is less than 4/6, which is less than 5/6. All right, now when we have to compare fractions with different denominators, we have to rewrite them with a common denominator using equivalent fractions. Now, something like 2/3, which we know is equivalent to 4/6. We saw that when we were doing equivalent fractions, so let's see how that works. Let's say Dan ate 2/6 of his candy. Let's say Stuart ate 2/3 of his candy, and Kirsten ate 1/2 of her candy. So compare the fractions on a number line and order them from least to greatest. Well, they all have different denominators, and we want them to be the same, so we're going to have to make equivalent fractions in order to have a common denominator. So 6, 3, and 2, you may recognize that all of these denominators are factors of 6. So 6 is going to be our common denominator, because if you'll recall, the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. All right, so let's change all of our denominators to be a 6. All right, so this one's already a 6, so we can just leave him alone. But here we have 2/3, and that means that we're going to have to multiply 3 by 2 in order to get 6. Well, if we multiply the bottom by 2, we have to multiply the top by 2 so that we don't change the value. And 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 2 is 6. Now let's have a look at 1/2. And so the denominator was 2, so in order to get the denominator to be 6, we have to multiply it by 3. If we multiply the denominator by 3, we must multiply the numerator by 3. So we have 2 times 3, which gives us 6, and 1 times 3 gives us 3. And so now we can place all these fractions on a number line. Again, we'll go back to our number line with sixths and place all of those numbers. So Dan was at 2/6, Kirsten was at 3/6, and Stuart was at 4/6. So we know that Stuart ate the most, then Kirsten, and then Dan ate the least. Now the original fractions from the least to the greatest was 2/6, 1/2, and 2/3. So 2/6 was the least, then 1/2 was greater, and then 1/3 was greater, 2/3 was greater than that. Now order the following fractions from least to greatest. Well, first, we're actually going to see if there is a common factor between all of these numbers so that we can reduce the fractions. Just as we can multiply a fraction by any number, as long as we do the same thing to the top and bottom, we can divide a fraction by any number as long as we do the same thing to the top and bottom. So we can actually reduce each denominator to a 4, since each denominator has 4 as a factor. All right, so let's start with 4/8. So what do we have to divide 8 by in order to get 4? Well, the answer is 2. So 8 divided by 2 gives us 4. If we divide the bottom by 2, we have to divide the top by 2. So 4 divided by 2. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So we'll change that to 2/4. And now let's do 18/24. What do we have to multiply 24 by in order to get 4? And the answer is 6. If we multiply the bottom by, divide the bottom by 6, we must also divide the top by 6. So 18 divided by 6 is 3, 24 divided by 6 is 4. And then we'll replace that with 3/4. And you can see we've already got a denominator of 4, so we can leave that one alone. And this is the last one that we need to do. 12 divided by 3 will give us 4. So if we divide the bottom by 3, we must divide the top by 3. So 3 divided by 3 gives us 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So now we have all 4 fractions with the same denominator. All right, so we can order them from least to greatest, because once the denominators are the same, we simply need to look at the numerators. So 1/4, 2/4, and then 3/4 and 3/4. Now, if we go back to our original fractions, we can order them as well. So 3/12 is the smallest, then 4/8, then 3/4, and then 18/24. Now, Aaron jogged for 1/3 of a kilometer, Bailey jogged for 1/2 of a kilometer, and Catherine jogged for 1/5 of a kilometer. Order these distances from the least to the greatest. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that each of them has a numerator of 1. So we can actually simply compare them by looking at their denominators because their numerators are 1. All right, so the smaller the denominator, the bigger the fraction. So let's actually look at this visually. So we're going to take this circle and we're going to divide it into 3 equal pieces and shade 1 piece. Then we're going to take the circle, divide it into 2 equal pieces and shade 1 piece. Then we're going to take the circle, we're going to divide it into 5 equal pieces and shade 1 piece. And so we can see out of these circles that 1/2 has the most shaded and 1/5 has the least shaded. So 1/2 is the biggest, 1/5 is the smallest. So we can see that the smaller the denominator, the bigger the fraction, or the bigger its value is. So we can order our fractions from least to greatest. 1/5 was the smallest, then 1/3, with 1/2 being the biggest. So Bailey jogged the greatest distance, then Aaron, and Catherine jogged the least. Ben, Jack, and Will all took different lengths of time to complete their math homework. It took Ben 3/5 of an hour to complete his homework. Jack spent 5/6 of an hour on homework, and Will took 2/3 of an hour to finish his. All right, so if Ben took 3/5, Jack spent 5/6, and Will took 2/3, we can see that all of the denominators are different. So the lowest common multiple of the denominators is called the lowest common denominator. All right, so first we have to find a lowest common denominator for each of the fractions so we compare them. And as I said, we already know how to find the lowest common denominator because it means it's the lowest common multiple of the denominators. I'm going to show you what I mean. So here we have 3/5, 5/6, and 2/3. So our denominators are 5, 6, and 3. In order to find the lowest common denominator, we need to find the lowest common multiple of these 3 numbers. And if you'll recall how to find that, we list our multiples of 3, our multiples of 5, and our multiples of 6. The smallest number to appear on all 3 lists, which happens to be 30, is the lowest common multiple of 5, 6, and 3, which means that the lowest common denominator is 30. All right, so don't let those words scare you. They're just more special names. All right, so let's start with Ben, 3/5 of an hour. And we have, in order to get 30 as our lowest common denominator, we have to multiply 5 by 6. If we multiply the denominator by 6, we must multiply the numerator by 6. And 3 times 6 is 18, 5 times 6 is 30. Now let's have a look at Jack. He was 5/6. What do we have to multiply 6 by to get 30? And the answer is 5. So if we multiply the bottom by 5, we must also multiply the top by 5. So 5 times 5 is 25, 6 times 5 is 30. And then finally, we can look at Will, who was 2/3. And what do we have to multiply 3 by to get 30? And the answer, of course, is 10. And so if we multiply the bottom by 10, we must multiply the top by 10. So 2 times 10 is 20, 3 times 10 is 30. So you can see we have all of the denominators the same. So now we can order the fractions from least to greatest by looking at the numerators. So we have 18 over 30, 25 over 30, and 20 over 30. So now we can order the original fractions from least to greatest, which was Ben at 3/5, Will at 2/3, and Jack at 5/6. So Jack spent the most time on his homework, and Ben spent the least amount of time on his homework. And that's your lesson on ordering fractions.